Your approach recommendations can be direction or service within your report and they got in the daily paper and the daily paper our client and option 9 can go out for practical generation of service अशोक फिजिक्स हार्ड होती है, तुम्हें उस पर मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी, तुम्हें उसके कॉन्सेप्ट क्लियर करने पड़ेंगे, क्वेश्चंस लगाने पड़ेंगे बार बार, फिर वो तुम्हें आएंगे। लाइब्रेरी वाइज में MBBS फाइनल ईयर स्टूडेंट हूँ। दिव्यांश में ऑप्स 90 पढ़ रही हूँ। लाइब्रेरी वाइब में हॉस्टल में हूँ, हॉस्टल में ऐसा होता रहता है, तो क्या कर सकते हैं। दिव्यांश में ऑप्स गायनी पढ़ रही हूँ। ऑप्स गायनी सब्जेक्ट होता है MBBS फाइनल ईयर का। हाँ भूमि,
आई थिंक अभी मेरी आवाज़ क्लियर आ रही होगी। क्या अभी क्लियर है? ओके भूमि, लेट्स स्टार्ट। पढ़ते हैं फिर से, है ना। Main event delivery of the baby, epidural anesthesia prolong the second stage delivered by 1 hour. Maximum fetal descent occurs in the second stage. Duration of the second stage, primary gravida 50 minutes, multi gravida 30 minutes. Maximum without epidural is 3 hours, and with epidural is 1 hour. Epidural anesthesia prolongs second stage by 1 hour. तो मैक्सिमम अगर बिना एपिड्यूरल एनेस्थीसिया के 3 आवर्स है तो 1 आवर ऐड कर लेंगे, 4 आवर हो जाएगा। ओके, अगर प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज है तो 3 आवर्स से ज़्यादा होगा। विदाउट एपिड्यूरल एनेस्थीसिया 30 मिनट्स 2 आवर्स। मैक्सिमम विदाउट एपिड्यूरल, मैक्सिमम विथ एपिड्यूरल more than 4 hours without epidural. Arrest of the descent, no descent of the fetal head more than 2 hours in the primary gravida and more than 1 hour in the multigravida. अरेस्ट ऑफ द डिसेंट, अरेस्ट ऑफ द डिसेंट तब बोलेंगे हम जब डिसेंट ऑफ द फीटल हेड जो है वो मोर देन 2 आवर्स तक प्राइमरी ग्रेविडा में एंड मोर देन 1 आवर इन द मल्टी ग्रेविडा। प्री रिक्वेस्टेड क्या है? नॉर्मल फीटल हार्ट साउंड। फीटल हार्ट साउंड जो है नॉर्मल है। मैनेजमेंट क्या है? हम मैटरनल एंड फीटल कंडीशन को देखेंगे। अगर फीटल डिस्ट्रेस है और मैटर डायलेट जो सर्विक्स है फुली डायलेटेड है तो हम अगर डिसेंट प्लस टू स्टेशन तक हुआ है हेड का तो हम सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन करेंगे। अगर +2 स्टेशन के बिलो है तो हम इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी कर सकते हैं, फॉर्सेप्स वगैरह यूज़ कर सकते हैं। बेडल स्ट्रिंग्स प्रेजेंट है, बेडल स्ट्रिंग प्लस प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज तो हम सीज़ेरियन। बेडल स्ट्रिंग है मतलब कि ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर था, ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर होगा तो हम हमेशा सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन करेंगे, इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी नहीं कर सकते। CPD सिफेलो पेल्विक डिस्प्रपोर्शन होगा तो सिफेलोपेल्विक डिस्प्रपोर्शन प्लस प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज विथ मोल्डिंग एंड कपट। CPD है एंड प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज है विथ मोल्डिंग है तो हम सिर्फ और सिर्फ सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन, देखो बेडल स्ट्रिंग होगी या फिर CPD है तो हमेशा हम सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन ही करेंगे, कोई इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी नहीं, नॉर्मल डिलीवरी बिल्कुल भी नहीं कर सकते। प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज नॉर्मल FSH एंड नो CPD नो ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड। अगर प्रोलॉन्ग स्टेज है खाली नॉर्मल स्टेज सेकेंड स्टेज फीटल हार्ट साउंड नॉर्मल है एंड CPD जो है वो नहीं है, ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर नहीं है तो स्टेशन 2 पर है तो सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन करेंगे। स्टेशन 2 के नीचे है तो हम फॉर्सेप या वैक्यूम का यूज़ कर सकते हैं फॉर द डिलीवरी। स्टेशन 2 के ऊपर है तो हम C सेक्शन और स्टेशन एट 2 और बिलो है तो फॉर्सेप और वैक्यूम का यूज़ करते हैं, यूज़ कर सकते हैं। नोट क्या रिक्वेस्ट फॉर द इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी फुल सर्वाइकल डायलेशन। इंस्ट्रूमेंटल के लिए क्या होना चाहिए? फुल सर्विक्स जो है फुली डायलेटेड होना चाहिए, स्टेशन 2 से ज़्यादा होना चाहिए। स्टेशन 2 पे होगा तो सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन करेंगे, 2 से ज़्यादा होगा तो हम इंस्ट्रूमेंटल कर सकते हैं। फीटल डिस्ट्रेस इन द फीटल डिस्ट्रेस फॉर्सेप करते हैं हम, वैक्यूम से ज़्यादा होता है फॉर्सेप। अच्छा, फीटल डिस्ट्रेस में वैक्यूम से ज़्यादा फॉर्सेप। सिनेरियो पहला सिनेरियो था, सिनेरियो में फीटल डिस्ट्रेस था और सर्विस फुली डायलेटेड था तो हमने क्या किया +2 पे है तो सीज़ेरियन, +2 के नीचे है तो फॉर्सेप किया। बेडल स्ट्रिंग है या फिर CPD प्रेजेंट है, प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज है तो हम सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन की तरफ जाएंगे। अगर प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज है नॉर्मल FSH है, प्रोलॉन्ग सेकेंड स्टेज नॉर्मल FSH है, नो CPD नहीं है तो अगर 2 पर है +2 स्टेशन पर है तो हम सीज़ेरियन सेक्शन करेंगे। +2 के नीचे है बिलो है तो हम वैक्यूम या फिर इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी कर सकते हैं। इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी के लिए रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या क्या हैं तो फुली डायलेटेड सर्विक्स में स्टेशन +2 से ज़्यादा होना चाहिए। इन द फीटल डिस्ट्रेस वैक्यूम से ज़्यादा बेटर होता है फॉर्सेप्स। ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर, बेबी अनेबल टू डिलीवर डिस्पाइट गुड यूट्राइन कॉन्ट्रैक्शन, फुली डायलेटेड सर्विक्स ड्यू टू द ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन ऑफ द पैसेज। बेबी इज़ अनेबल टू डिलीवर डिस्पाइट गुड कॉन्ट्रैक्शन अच्छे से होते हैं, सर्विक्स डायलेटेड है बट बेबी डिलीवर नहीं हो रहा है, ठीक है। Unable to deliver despite good contraction, fully dilated cervix due to obstruction in the passage. ड्यू टू ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन इन द पैसेज सीन कब कब होता है ऑब्स्ट्रक्टिव लेबर सीन इन द ट्रांसवर्स लाइक कॉन्जाइंट हाइड्रोसेफेलस फाइब्रोइड यूट्रस ट्रांसवर्स लाइक कॉन्जाइंट ट्रांसवर्स लाइक कॉन्जाइंट हाइड्रोसेफेलस फाइब्रोइड यूट्रस हाइड्रोसेफेलस फाइब्रोइड यूट्रस कॉन्जाइंट ट्रांसवर्स लाइक clinical examination on general examination mother appears exhausted dehydrated tachypneic acidotic breath क्लिनिकली एग्जामिन करोगे जब पेशेंट को जो ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर का होगा वो एग्जॉस्टेड होगा डिहाइड्रेटेड होगा ट्रैकेपनिक होगा एसिडोटिक ब्रेथ होगी उसकी एसिडोटिक ब्रीथिंग कर रहा होगा उस टाइम में पर एब्डोमिनल एग्जामिनेशन करोगे तो तुम्हें वन ऑफ द पैथोग्नोमिक फाइंडिंग मिलेगी जो होगी बेडल्स रिंग ग्रूव बिटवीन द अपर एंड लोअर यूट्राइन सेगमेंट अपर एंड लोअर यूट्राइन सेगमेंट के बीच में तुम्हें मिलेगी एक ग्रूव मिलेगा जिसे बोलते हैं बेडल्स रिंग्स दिस वन इज कॉल्ड बेडल्स रिंग्स ओके retracted upper segment tonically contracted upper segment retracted होगा tonically contracted distended lower uterine segment passively dilated distended lower uterine segment and passively dilated dry hot vagina fetal distress pulse more than 100 dry hot vagina होगी pulse more than 100 होगा pulse more than 100 कॉम्प्लिकेशन क्या क्या हो सकते हैं ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड में अब ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन हो रखा है प्रेशर लग रहा है तो यूट्रस रप्चर हो सकता है वेसिको वेजाइनल फिस्टुला हो सकता है आफ्टर 7 to 10 days ड्यू टू इस्चेमिक इंजरी ऑफ द ब्लैडर constant dribbling of the urine per vaginal most common cause of the VVF vesico-vaginal fistula in the developing countries. Management is immediate cesarean section and resuscitation of the mother. Resuscitation plus hydration maintain करेंगे. Avoid करेंगे waiting due to increase risk of the rupture. Due to increase transfers like conjoint hydrocephalus fibroid uterus exhausted dehydrated tachypneic acidotic breathing Baddel's ring group in the upper and lower uterine segment retracted upper segment distended lower uterine segment fetal distress dry hot vagina pulse more than 100 complication rupture of the uterus vesico-vaginal fistula after 7 to 10 days vesico rupture होगा vesico-vaginal fistula हो सकता है after 7 to 10 days due to ischemic necrosis ischemic injury of the bladder constant dribbling of the urine per vagina vesico-vaginal fistula की वजह से constant dribbling of the urine हो सकती है per vaginally most common cause of the vesico-vaginal fistula in the developing countries. Management immediate cesarean section resuscitation dehydration maintain करेंगे. हम अवॉइड करेंगे क्या वेट करेंगे तो रिस्क ऑफ द रप्चर इंक्रीज हो जाए. ऑक्सीटोसिन नहीं देंगे, कॉन्ट्रैक्शन ऑलरेडी हो रखा है तो हम ऑक्सीटोसिन देकर के कॉन्ट्रैक्शन क्यों बढ़ाएंगे, नहीं देंगे. इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी नहीं कर सकते, हम डायरेक्टली सिजेरियन सेक्शन ही करेंगे. वेट नहीं करेंगे, ऑक्सीटोसिन नहीं देंगे, इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी नहीं करेंगे. ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर में हम वेट नहीं करना, ऑक्सीटोसिन नहीं देंगे, इंस्ट्रूमेंटल डिलीवरी नहीं करना. बेडल्स रिंग रिट्रैक्शन रिंग होती है एंड ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड लेबर में होती है बिटवीन द अपर एंड लोअर यूट्राइन सेगमेंट स्टेज ऑफ द लेबर सेकेंड में मिलती है. पैल्पेबल पर एब्डोमिनल पैल्पेबल है, विजिबल ऑन द पर एब्डोमेन मैटरनल फीटल कंडीशन मैटरनल फीटल डिस्ट्रेस मिलेगा एंड रिलीव्ड बाय सिजेरियन सेक्शन. constriction ring spasm of the segment of the uterus due to the inadvertent of the oxytocin. Use any site first and second per vaginal palpable on the vaginal visible or not visible. Visibility, it is not visible. Maternal fetal distress normal, cesarean, uterine relaxant. If no relaxant, cesarean section, terbutaline relaxant, given example terbutaline, cessation of the oxytocin, contraction, Rodor string contraction in spasm segment of the uterus due to inadequate use of the oxytocin. Any site first or second paravaginal not visible norm oxytocin uterine relaxant. WHO recommendation between the upper and lower segment second stage में होती है, palpable होती है maternal fetal distress constitution section. ये retraction gives is also called a retraction ring. Bedell ring also called retraction ring. Contraction is spasm the segment of the uterus due to the inadequate use of the oxytocin. Any side first and second per vaginal not visible normal. Maternal fetal condition normal. Cessation of the oxytocin uterine relaxant and no अगर uterine relaxant नहीं है तो हम cesarean section तब हम cesarean section lower vertical cesarean section. Surrounding cesarean section, vertical section, wall cesarean section. WHO recommendations at the time of the admission recommended note vitals of the patient, perform lipod manual, perform lipod में fundal grip वगैरह करेंगे, auscultate the fetal heart sound, per vaginal examination करेंगे, per vaginal examination contact the active bleeding due to the note routine edema, routine pelvic examination, not routine edema, routine pelvic examination, routine CTG, routine pelvic saving, routine pelvic not recommended. Recommended क्या है, vitals लेना है, lipid maneuver करना है, auscultate करेंगे fetal heart sound को and per vaginal examination like contraindicated. अगर vaginal bleeding हो रही है तो फिर हम नहीं करेंगे. In the first stage of the labor, ambulation allowed in the early labor. Lying in the left lateral position, late labor, membrane rupture, oral intake, solid not allowed, liquid allowed for C-section, solid liquid 6 stop 6 hours. First ambulation allowed in early stage ambulation lie in the left lateral position. Late labor, membrane rupture, oral ending, solid not allowed, liquid allowed for the cesarean section. Solid stop 6 hours of before surgery, liquid stop 2 hours of the bladder function, and encourage to relieve the bladder every 2 hours, relieve bladder every 2 hours. Pain relief recommended the choice companion of the choice allowed companion of the choice is allowed step 1, 2, 3 and 5 have been included under the supportive care in the labor care guide. First step is ambulation, second oral intake, solid liquid allowed before guide not allowed. Third, bladder function, bladder encouraged to relieve the bladder every 2 hours. Pain relief recommended companion of the choice. Monitoring maternal pulse and BP early, temperature of the membrane not ruptured early, ruptured 4 hourly, uterine contraction every 30 minutes per vaginal, fourth early, fetal heart sound auscultation documented every 30 minutes. First stage 30 minutes and second stage 15 minutes. High risk 15 minutes and 5 minutes. Second stage 5 minutes. Maternal pulse and BP early, temperature if membrane is not ruptured early, ruptured 4 early, uterine contraction every 30 minutes. Per vaginal examination, fourth early, fetal heart sound fetal heart rate auscultation documented every 30 minutes, so persisted 30 minutes. And low risk, high risk is high risk 15 minutes, high risk is second stage 15 minutes, high risk 5 minutes. Management of the second stage of labor, prevention of the perineal tear, apply warm compression. I apply warm compress to perineum, perineal massage, control delivery of the fetal head, modified region maneuver, not recommended routine episiotomy, fundal pressure delivery can be done in any position. One hand initially flexes, then extend fetal head. One hand initially flexes, then extend fetal head. Other hand support the perineum. Recommended note vitals of the patient. Perform Laporte maneuver. Auscultate the fetal heart sound. Perform examination. Contraindicated bleeding. Active bleeding. Routine edema. Routine pelvic examination. Routine CTG. Routine pelvic shaving. In the first stage of the labor, ambulation allowed. The early labor lie in the left lateral position. Late labor, membrane rupture. Oral intake solid not allowed. Liquid allowed for the cesarean section. Stop 6 hours before surgery. Liquid stop 2 hours. Bladder every 2 hours. Pain recommended campaigns for the choice of the lot. 7, 2, 4 and 5 have been allowed under the supportive care. The labor care guide monitoring, maternal pulse and the BP, early temperature rupture हो गया, then early and not ruptured, then early, rupture हो गया, then 4 hour पे करेंगे. return contraction 30 minutes पे. पर vaginal fourth hourly हो गया. fetal heart sound documented every 30 minutes, persisted 30 minutes. Management of the second stage of the labor, prevent the perineal tear, apply warm compression to perineum, perineal massage, warm compression, perineal massage, control delivery, modify region maneuver, not routine episiotomy, fundal pressure can be done in any position. One hand initially flex, then extend fetal head, other hand support perineum.
Hi Vichu, welcome to this very important video on partogram. If you are a NEET PG aspirant, INICT or
Hello Bhumi.
an undergraduate student, partogram is a very important topic. For FMG bachas, you also need to know modified WHO partogram and labor care guide, the important points related to it, right? So partogram becomes important for every student. Now coming to partogram, see the concept of partogram, it was given by Friedman. So the first partogram was developed by Friedman. And the first partogram, basically it was not the kind of partogram which you are seeing these days. The first partogram was a curve like this, which was a sigmoid shaped curve, right? So this is what was called as Friedman curve, and this partogram was an S-shaped or a sigmoid shaped curve. Now, when Friedman gave this curve or this partogram, see, as of now, recently WHO has said that active phase begins at 8 centimeters. ACOG says that active phase begins at 6 centimeters, and I told you that earlier WHO said that active phase began at 4 centimeters. Now, when Friedman gave this curve, at that time, active phase began at 3 centimeters. Look here. If you make a line here, this is coming at 3 centimeters, and this is the place from where the active phase is beginning. Can you see? So when Friedman made this curve, that is the Friedman curve, and when it gave the concept of partogram, at that time the active phase began at 3 centimeters. Next thing which I want you to see over here is that Friedman divided this active phase into 3 parts. Right, that is the Friedman curve, and when it gave the concept of partogram, at that time the active phase began at 3 centimeters. Next thing which I want you to see over here is that Friedman divided this active phase into 3 parts. Right, into the 3 phases. So active phase of labor was further divided into 3 phases. There was an acceleration phase, then there was a phase of maximum slope, and then there was a deceleration phase. Right. So over here, remember that when Friedman gave the partogram, it was a sigmoid shaped curve. So it was a phase of maximum slope, and then there was a deceleration phase, right? So over here, remember that when Friedman gave the partogram, it was a sigmoid shaped curve, which was called as Friedman curve, right? In Friedman curve, active phase began at 3 centimeters, and active phase was divided into 3 stages, right? So there was an acceleration phase. It was further divided into 3 phases: acceleration phase, phase of maximum slope, and deceleration phase, right? Now, do you see over here that when Friedman drew the curve, that is the Friedman curve, which is the first partogram which was ever introduced, was there any concept of alert line or action line? No, there wasn't any concept of alert line or action line. This concept of alert line and action line, this was later given by Philpotts and Castle. So Philpotts and Castle gave the concept of alert line and action line, right? The alert line, since the time it has been introduced in partogram, alert line is drawn only on one principle, and that principle is that the minimum dilatation in active phase is 1 centimeter per hour. So since the time the concept of alert line and action line have come, since that time alert line is based on this principle that the minimum dilatation in active phase should be 1 centimeter per hour. Now the partograms which you as student have to study in detail are 2 partograms. Number 1 is a modified WHO partogram. Now this modified WHO partogram, it is based on earlier WHO recommendations or old WHO recommendations, right? Whereas we have another partogram which is the more recent partogram, which is called as the next generation partogram, and this next generation partogram is called as the labor care guide, right? And this is based on the recent WHO recommendations, right? So these are the 2 partograms which you have to study in detail. We are going to begin with modified WHO partogram. As I told you, modified WHO partogram, it is based on older WHO recommendations, right? In this partogram, latent phase was not represented. The latent phase is not represented, only the active phase is represented. Let me show you the partogram, and then it becomes easier for you. So this over here is modified WHO partogram. How are you going to identify this partogram, and how are you going to differentiate this partogram from labor care guide? All of you, I want first you should be paying attention to your screens, and then you should be writing. Now, in modified WHO partogram, the first important thing which you should notice is these two lines, which are parallel lines, where the first line is the alert line and the second line is the action line. Always remember, bacha, that the time duration between alert line and action line is 4 hours, right? Now, in modified WHO partogram, we are representing only the active phase. And in modified WHO partogram, which is based on the older WHO recommendations, active phase began at 4 centimeters dilatation of the cervix. So you can see that the alert line is beginning from 4 centimeters dilatation of the cervix, right? Now, in comparison to this, let me show you the labor care guide. See here. Look at this partogram. First important thing in this partogram, do you see any alert line or action line? No. So if there is no alert line and action line, it means you are looking at labor care guide. That is one difference. Second difference is, in labor care guide, you are not only representing the active's first stage of labor, right? You are also representing the second stage of labor. Plotting is done for second stage of labor, which was not done in modified WHO partogram. In modified WHO partogram, only the active phase of labor is represented. Active phase of first stage of labor is represented. Whereas in the latest partogram which we have, which is the next generation partogram, you not only plot the active phase of the first stage of labor, you are also plotting the second stage of labor. Third very important difference. In labor care guide, the active phase begins at 5 centimeters dilatation of the cervix. Whereas in case of modified WHO partogram, active phase began at 4 centimeters dilatation of the cervix. Now, another difference which I want all of you to notice, in modified WHO partogram, as such, there is no section like section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, right? But if you compare it with labor care guide, you can see in labor care guide, there are sections, section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So in labor care guide, there are 7 sections. So these are the broad differences between labor care guide and modified WHO partogram. Although there will be many more others which I will tell you, but broadly these are the differences between modified WHO partogram and labor care guide. Now let's talk about first modified WHO partogram. As I told you, in modified WHO partogram, only the active phase is represented. Active phase begins at 4 centimeters, right? So because active phase begins at 4 centimeters, that is why in modified WHO partogram, plotting begins at 4 centimeters dilatation of cervix. So, active phase begins at 4 centimeters dilatation of cervix, so plotting also begins at 4 centimeters dilatation of the cervix. Now, in modified WHO partogram, there are 2 parallel lines, alert line. Number 1 is alert line and number 2 is action line. Alert line is drawn on the principle, I told you, whenever alert line is drawn, it is drawn on the principle that minimum dilatation in active phase is 1 centimeter per hour. Action line is always drawn 4 hours to the right of alert line. Please remember, second stage of labor is not represented in modified WHO partogram. Second stage of labor is represented in labor care guide, but not in modified WHO partogram. Now, as I told you, in labor care guide, there are 7 sections. There are no such sections in modified WHO partogram. But for our convenience, we gynecologists divide the modified WHO partogram into 3 parts. So we have an upper part over here, which is the part above the alert line and action line, right? Then we have a middle part. Middle part includes the area where alert line and action line are there. And then we have a bottom part which is below this area where there is alert line and action line. So the entire partogram, we divide it into 3 parts. We have an upper part, we have a middle part, and a lower part, or the bottom part, right? Now first let's focus on the upper part. Upper part of the partogram is giving you information related to the fetus. For example, it is telling you about fetal heart rate, it is telling you about amniotic fluid, and it is telling you about molding. These are the 3 things which the upper part of the partogram is telling you. So upper part of the partogram is telling you about what? It is telling you about the fetal condition, it is telling you about fetal heart rate, it is telling you about molding, it is telling you about amniotic fluid. Now, when we come to fetal heart rate, you have to plot fetal heart rate after every 30 minutes. Please remember, I told you when we were doing intrapartum fetal surveillance that WHO says that auscultation of the fetal heart rate has to be done more oftenly, right? It has specially given us guidelines that how often you should auscultate the fetal heart rate during labor. But auscultation is different and plotting on a partogram is different. So WHO says that plotting of fetal heart rate has to be done after every 30 minutes and fetal heart rate is represented by a circle. So suppose just now